Come on in, everybody. Love this music.
Yes, I love it. It's a slapper.
Welcome to the show, everybody. We're back. We're live. You got Miss Patty and Mr. Tacos in the house. How you doing tonight, Miss Patty?
Pretty good. Happy Friday, Junior. How are
Right?
you?
All right. Is it Friday Eve? Is it Friday? Yeah, it's Thursday, right?
Yeah,
Friday. So, yeah, right.
it's Friday, Junior. Mini Friday.
Yeah. So, well, we got a special guest tonight, y'all, that we're waiting for. Should be on shortly, but in the meantime, uh, we can talk about what is that? The Martin Luther King breakfast. What what
Yes.
what did you get out of it? Or man, I
You
had a
know,
great time. I had a great time.
yeah. I almost couldn't make it. One of my good veteran sisters, she had to take a test for her like surgical something, and so I took care of her two older babies, and
Yeah,
so but then I got the okay. They're like, oh, bring them. I was like, you know what, let me bring these two little kids with me, and they had a great time. And
yeah,
the little girl, she had part of MLK's speech memorized,
yeah.
and on the way there she said it, and I was like, okay, baby girl, like that's beautiful, because yeah, a lot of his messages and his legacy needs to carry on.
Right, right.
Mhm.
So, um, didn't mean to cut you off, but we got with us. Dun, da, da, da. How you
Hey,
doing there, my brother?
I'm doing well. How you doing, Carlos?
Good, 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 and
Hello, how you doing?
welcome. You want
nice
to
to meet
introduce
you again.
yourself to everybody? You know, the ones that don't know you, the few that don't know you.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Jelani Killings. Currently a candidate for Contra Costa County Supervisor, District 5. Definitely glad to be here. Thank you for the invite, Carlos.
Man, no problem. Thank you for spending some time with us. This is great. I know you and Miss Patty talked, and you know, we had a few questions for you. So, without any further ado, I'm just gonna let Miss Patty and you guys just talk away here, and I'll just sit here and nod my head.
All right. Well, it's nice to see you again. What can I call you? Mr. Killings, Jelani. Um,
Jelani is fine.
okay. Well, nice to see you again. It was really nice to meet you in person. I don't know anything about you. So I look forward to learning more and letting our community know more about you. So let's start with question number one. Um, you told us about yourself already, but question number one: what led you to run for the Board of Supervisors?
Yeah, there's a lot there. I think it'll tie into some of the other questions, just an overall
Hmm.
desire to be involved in public service. But really, it just comes to we need really independent and really thoughtful leadership at all levels of government, specifically. And really, in terms of, I've been serving in the city of Pittsburgh, so there are specific relationships between cities and the county that I think need to be improved as it relates to regional efforts. And that can cross a number of different things, from transportation to health services to just overall, once again, collaboration when it comes to regional development here in Contra Costa County. So that is a big focus for me. And I'll share a little bit more just in terms of background that'll kind of tie into really my desire, really just to improve the effectiveness of government and the programs and services that it provides. I think that that's a sticking point for many. You know, when we're looking at just living here in California, we see that the cost of living is skyrocketing.
Hmm.
And
It
at the
is.
same time, we're being asked to give more, but we're receiving less. And that's something that I think has frustration across communities. And I think we need a higher level of accountability when it comes to government, when it comes to services, programs, and ultimately when it comes to just responsiveness to residents. So that's a brief kind of introduction in terms of what's leading me to this run for Board of Supervisors. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just a lot that I've seen in the past 8 years in serving in local government. And then also just the need for leadership that is principled, that is responsive, then also will be just clear-minded when it comes to a lot of the decisions that are currently facing us. So I know we'll dive into a lot more of those topics and conversations. But yeah, I'm really excited to put my foot forward and offer voters an opportunity to have a trustworthy leader at the supervisor level.
Love it.
Nice.
So this is kind of tied to that. How long have you been on the Pittsburgh City Council?
So I am going on my 8th year for the Pittsburgh City Council.
So experiences.
Yes, I'm coming to the end of my 2nd term. So I was first elected in 2016. And so very excited about the progress we've been able to make in Pittsburgh over the past 8 years. Just like with any, community, any government, any really agency, there's challenges that you have to work through. But we've made good progress. Really, once again, a big focus on just performance and outcomes, being able to share with the community goals that we've set, a vision, whether it comes to strategic planning, overlook for what we're looking at for the next 20 years through our general plan update, and really to be in a decision-making position at a time where your city is adopting the next 20-year general plan, I think is really exciting for myself. I'm big on policy, in terms of looking at policy, the effectiveness of policy, looking at both intended and unintended consequences of policy. And I think that that's all necessary in terms of sound decision making and really just being open and transparent for the public. So 8 years and looking forward to continuing to move the city forward.
No, definitely. Something I love about Pittsburgh is that Antioch is all right, but the past few years, Pittsburgh really highlighted and uplifted the diversity in the mom and pop businesses. I remember seeing that, and I was like, "Wow!" Like they're out there really showing love to these entrepreneurs that are starting from the bottom up, and so that was a beautiful thing to see. The city of Pittsburgh elected supporting them, so that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, and that's definitely intentional, right? So when you start talking about economic development, some folks feel that you can't move the needle or you really can't do much in the realm of economic development, but you have to have vision, and there's definitely key principles that feed into economic development. Typically people think, well, everything you do in local government feeds to economic development. So keeping your city safe, having clean streets, having infrastructure, creating an environment where businesses can come in and thrive, which is absolutely true. But there's also a level of, once again, as you shared, supporting your local small businesses, because the best calling card to attracting new business is showing the success of existing businesses within your community. So if you have existing businesses that are able to expand, that are able to grow, that only provides incentive for others to say, hey, there's something going on here in this community that we can be a part of and that we can have success as well. So definitely from small businesses, whether you're looking at our local restaurants, we've had pilot programs to really upscale, the operations of our local restaurants, especially after COVID. And then as well, when you just look across sectors, community is really big in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh pride is a real thing. And so we really take pride in just community, the legacy that we have. And so if you got something good, the community will most likely support it. And so we're looking to that continued growth in the community with our local businesses and our economic development efforts.
Okay. All right, let's talk about you. Where are you from?
Yeah, I'm from Pittsburgh. This is home for me. In terms of family, that's in the city of Pittsburgh, going back probably a couple of generations. I know my grandmother moved out from Chicago, came to Pittsburgh. And so we've had family here in the community and have built a legacy as well. And so with that, went to Pittsburgh High School, graduated. So Pittsburgh pride.
Nice.
Went off to college at Clark Atlanta University down south at an HBCU, and really had a great time being down south. A lot of history. Also really just encouraged with the entrepreneurship that really, really got me going being in Atlanta and seeing so much entrepreneurship, people active, starting businesses. When I came back home in 2010, started getting involved in local community-based organizations, serving youth, and then ultimately went back and got my master's from Cal State East Bay in public policy and management. And there's a story and really getting to that place because it really sparked this drive towards public service and elected office. Is that back in about 2012 or 2013, there was an opening for a school board position in the city of Pittsburgh. Dr. Wong was a former school board member and had stepped down to move to Southern California, and then left the vacancy, and they had an open interview process. So I'm relatively young at that time, full of energy. I'm working with youth and saying, hey, I have all these ideas. I can do something about what's going on with our youth. And so they had an open interview process, and I made it.
No.
No. I wonder if his phone died.
I know, huh? Man, he was just, look at that. Technical difficulties, folks.
We lost you.
Yeah, he'll come back. Watch. If he didn't plug his phone, look, there he is. Look. Hey, take two.
Yeah, was getting the flow going.
It's all
But
good.
yeah,
It's all
so
good, brother.
that started the level of public service, making it to the final three in that interview process for school board. And community members were like, hey, you should have got it, or you really had great ideas, keep going, stay involved, stay in tune. But for me personally, this was an assessment for me, is that I had a lot of fervor, I had a lot of ideas, but I didn't understand government structure and really the policy formation. And so that's what led me to go get my master's in public policy and public management, to really understand how the gears work, how to properly advocate and set policy, understanding management of public agencies. You're talking about very large budgets. And so just everything from municipal financing. And while going through that, really found the understanding that my drive, my desire really wasn't for educational curriculum, that it was more for community development. And so although I was like, yeah, I have all this passion, working with youth, and it went for the school board, going through the master's program really helped to fine tune where I was really trying to make change, really where my passion was, which was in community building, community development, setting policy in terms of addressing workforce development needs, infrastructure, and once again, just seeing communities be able to thrive. So that's what led me ultimately to 2016 to running. But yeah, I've been engaged and looking forward to once again continue making an impact here locally, because I really believe all politics are local, and this is where we can make the biggest impact and change.
Yes, I feel that. I felt that after the murder of George Floyd. I couldn't stress myself out enough. I was like, okay, let me bring it back. What's happening locally? And that's the local aspect. And we start from the communities where we're at. Next question. I peeped your profile. I saw you started from humble beginnings. You started as a youth camp supervisor, and then you went to McDonald's, Target, program coordinating, office management, and H&R Block, and then the big one, ethics analyst for the city of Oakland. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So definitely appreciate you sharing the background. And so definitely coming out of college, and even during college, always believed in getting to work. To be able to be out in college and be able to support yourself and get your own apartment, things like that, had to work during school. And so definitely from the management positions at local fast food restaurants to working overnight at Target, things like that, just to make sure that, you have what you need while you're going through college. But definitely coming back home, you kind of read off in terms of when I came back, getting involved with local youth programs, nonprofits, getting involved in terms of, management, in terms of taxes, things like that. But the passion ultimately was in, once again, community development and local government. And so what led me to where I've been for the past 10 years is when I went to my master's program at Cal State East Bay. This is something I really want to plug for young folks that are out there watching. If you're in college or pursuing, advanced degrees, or you're looking for where to go for career. When I was an undergrad, I didn't take advantage of internships. right? And so that's something that, I really want to encourage folks. If you're in college, make that connection between what you're learning in the classroom and getting that real world experience while you're getting that degree, while you're getting that certification. And so when I started the master's program at Cal State East Bay, I knew that I wanted to apply what I was getting in the classroom directly in the field. And so the city of Oakland had an internship with their public ethics commission. I applied for it, and it worked out to where I started doing that while I was going through my master's program. And so in that work, I was afforded the opportunity where a position was created for me as that department grew. And just to share a little bit of background about Public Ethics Commission, its role in the city of Oakland and kind of the work that I do, it's all about public trust. It's all about building public trust in your local government institution, specifically in this role in the city of Oakland. So my position is overseeing our education and compliance program. So you think of everything from campaign finance laws, how money comes in and out of elections, to transparency laws, ensuring that the public is able to access meetings and agendas, that everything's accessible, public records, that they're responded to in a timely manner. Overseeing, in larger cities like Oakland, they're what are called lobbyists. So people who are paid to influence decisions that, elected officials, appointed officials make. And so we oversee that program, ensuring that it's transparent, that the public knows who the individuals are that are getting paid to influence policy. And then the larger context is overseeing government ethics laws. So ensuring that there's no conflicts of interest, that there's no misuse of city resources, understanding rules that apply to public servants that may cause them to try to do things for their own personal gain or private advantage. And so a lot of it, is once again, trying to keep integrity in city government. It's about good governance, because if the people don't trust, the officials that are running our local institutions, it becomes very problematic to get things done, and it causes a lot of distrust. And so building public trust is core to me. It's very important for the success of our local government agencies. And so that's the work that I've been engaged in for the past 10 years, which has also afforded me a front row seat to a lot of the major policies that we're seeing come out of the Bay Area and a lot of the conversations in general. So really appreciative of the work that I've been able to do.
Yeah, thank you. You dropped a lot of knowledge. Go ahead, Carlos.
I'm sorry. We got some questions. I don't know if you see the comments, but we got AA Nation is asking, in what ways have you reached out to youth and help youth organizations, and what will you do to help the youth if you win this election? And then they also want to know, how will you help the youth that are LGBTQ and Black?
Yeah, and it's a great question. Appreciate them coming in even while we're online.
Yeah, thank you.
And so definitely, youth is really a passion in terms of preparing the next generation. And so I'll just share this out front. It's really about uplifting all youth. So I know we can look at different sectors, we can look at different marginalized communities, and definitely for me, the impact is raising everybody up. And so I know we're not going to have necessarily all night to talk and dive into everything, but definitely want to hit points even as the questions I was given and as they come in. So definitely let me know if I've covered what's been asked, and at the same time, being able to keep us moving along. And so in dealing with youth, the passion for me is that for me, I grew up and I was afforded a lot of youth programs coming up. And this really can dovetail into some things that had a positive influence on my life. So when I look back, I was a part of a youth commission growing up, being able to see the inner workings of local government, being able to advocate for programs for the youth. Big thing that we had is that if you grew up in Pittsburgh at that time, we had 2 junior high schools, Hillview Junior High and Central Junior High. And it wasn't the best of relationships between the 2 junior high schools. There was definitely love in being in Pittsburgh, but, a lot of times there was some head bumping. And so one of the things that we wanted to do as youth was bring the schools together. And so we did the first Hillview Central dance and combining it and bring it together, because we knew we were all growing up in the community. Yeah, there was some issues that had came up, but it was about just bringing youth together, having fun, advocating for a good time within the community. So I only bring that up is because I know there's a lot of ideas with our young people, things that are impacting them, and we always want to lend them a voice. So one of the things we did on the Pittsburgh City Council is that after I graduated high school and I was off in college, the Pittsburgh Youth Commission went away, and we did not have a youth commission in the city of Pittsburgh. Thanks to advocacy that we had and being on the Pittsburgh City Council, we brought back the Pittsburgh Youth Commission and now afford youth in our community a seat at the table. Another area where I was key in terms of my service on the Pittsburgh City Council. And once again, I can get lengthy, and so I'm going to be real mindful of my answers because I can talk personally about just my investment in youth, working with youth through my local church, or just working with youth in general and my passion. But just in terms of my position as an elected official and things that I've done on record, I was the champion and the author of the City of Pittsburgh's Youth and Young Adult Services Master Plan. And so essentially what this plan adopted by our city council does is that it creates basically a coordinated youth services network. So we have tens of millions of dollars being spent by so many different organizations, whether you look at the school district as the largest youth.
No. Did it freeze on your end too?
Mm-hmm.
Oh no.
Like we have all this money towards youth services, but are we getting the outcomes that we desire? When you look at a lot of the disparities that we're seeing, whether it comes through educational, whether it comes to looking at health disparities, when it comes to the outcomes with career and college, are we getting the desired results? And so this plan was essentially saying, how do we bring everyone together for a coordinated effort? How do we leverage the resources that are going towards our youth? And how do we start benchmarking what we're actually doing to measure if it's working or not for our youth? One of the pieces of that plan we're excited to announce, this recently came out, is that Pittsburgh is now a My Brother's Keeper community under that alliance. And so we understood that there were certain things that we need to look at. And so under the Obama Foundation, under the My Brother's Keeper initiative, the city of Pittsburgh has now become part of that MBK alliance, which just provides more resources to the city, but also really clears our focus in terms of what we can do to really lift up our youth and ensure that we're getting the outcomes that we desire. So a lot more that I could share about youth, but absolutely it's a passion for me, and I would continue that at the county board of supervisors level. We know that there's advocacy right now through Measure X dollars for more youth centers to come out here to East Contra, Costa County. And I think workforce development, even at looking at youth employment, is a big component as well. So definitely looking at that investment in our youth to continue. And that's really one of my strong focuses as well.
I'm going to go ahead and answer number 4 for you, where I asked, what motivates you? I'm going to say, I think the youth motivates you.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely motivated by seeing communities thrive, right? And we're talking about all members within our community thrive, being afforded opportunities to support their families. I'm married with 2 beautiful children. My lovely wife were very supportive and allow me to be in this space as far as being in public service. I couldn't do it without their support, but coming home and looking my kids in the face, an 8-year-old daughter, a 5-year-old son, I see hope. I see the future in them and doing all that I can to make sure that it's better for them as they're growing up and that they're afforded opportunities. So absolutely youth, family, community progress, and wanting to see folks thrive. And that's really something that keeps me going.
All right. Beautiful. I shed a few tears right there. What challenges have you faced in your leadership? Let's say in your time, your 8 years in city council, what are the biggest challenges that you face and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely even looking at that, first I was thinking, oh, do you want to look at personal challenges? Definitely can share from that perspective as well. And even bringing that into, where we are now and how just even with leadership style. So, many folks, and I know we all have challenges that we've worked through. And I think the resilience is really key, and I just want to just touch this really brief. I won't harp on it long, but just kind of give the frame of mind in terms of even growth and leadership personally. So 10 days before my 9th birthday, my father was murdered. And so growing up, my mother definitely presented me being a young man and trying to find myself a lot of challenges in that. So, you know, you have your rebellious years in high school, found myself in terms of running with law enforcement that ended up having me, you know, on probation, you know, while I'm in high school type thing. And so you learn from that. You know, there's decisions that have been made. You learn from that, and just having mentors within my life. You know, I look at my uncle, who is really more like my father, and spiritual father was also my pastor, looking at the influence he's had in my life. I look at coaches that I had. I played a lot of sports. And so being able to have men to pour into my life, keep me on the straight and narrow, and really build community as a young man is really beneficial. And so I always advocate for that. And so as you look and you translate into, you know, just dealing with challenges in life, challenges in terms of even serving on the city council, I mean, you're faced with so many decisions, right? And the thing about public office is that you never make 100% of people happy. And so, but how do you work through those challenges? How do you work when things come up to be able to have conversations with community, to be transparent, to be open? And that's what I try to pride myself on, is that challenges come up. We've had a lot of things, and as we're trying to address, you know, disparities when it comes to poverty or other issues locally, I think there's just a number of challenges that we're trying to work through. And I think just being able to have a level mind, being able to hear folks in terms of what they're bringing to the council, and even obviously when it gets hot, when you're in a public position, everything is open, you know, so the good, the bad, the ugly, and being able just to roll with it. And so for me, the challenges I would say in this space is really just trying to keep a level head. You know, there's so much that is pulling in so many different directions. As an elected official, you can't, you know, be the savior of the world. And I say that humbly, meaning that, you know, you're not going to be able to solve everything, but you have to be able to have a listening ear. You have to be able to hear different sides and different perspectives, and then ultimately make decisions that are in the best interest in terms of the totality or the most good in the community. And so with that, just trying to think of different challenges that come up. You know, we've had a lot of conversations, you know, in terms of, you know, the impact that cannabis would have locally, and trying to work through that. We were able to come to a place in terms of not only looking at obviously an industry that has come in and really in California by voters, and, you know, more of the industry trying to come into local communities, but really trying to safeguard even for our youth. So we had a lot of youth advocates that were coming out and saying, hey, you know, what are we going to do to make sure that we're safeguarding our youth or the influence that the industry may have on youth? So being able to find those mediums and be able to create and craft policies that don't become predatory on the community, but look at all the different angles is really challenges that we have to work through. I think others that, you know, just really come to mind is as we're looking at even just the impacts. We have a lot of folks that are advocating for more stringent rules on tobacco, and how can we try to mitigate the impacts of the tobacco industry on our youth and on our communities. And I think those are things that we have to listen to in terms of being able to work through those challenges of saying, okay, you have businesses and you have the needs of those who may have operations within your community, and then trying to weigh that against public health and really community building. And I think there's so many threads of that in terms of challenges that we have in local government. But once again, that's what we're here for. We're here to work through them and ultimately to come up with solutions that'll move the community forward. So if there are any other type of specific challenges to work through, hear about, definitely open. But those are what come to mind.
All right.
Right.
Thank you so much for sharing, especially just such a your lived experience. And I'm sorry for that, you know, your loss at such a young age.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that and being transparent with that and sharing.
I think
Carlos?
we have one more question here. So they want to know, so who are you endorsed by, and what are your thoughts and plans on the Measure X funds?
Yeah, great question. You know, I don't have a list of endorsements. It's something that I really pride myself on, both in pretty much every election I've ran. You know, there's a political game that obviously gets played. There are definitely organizations, individuals, obviously endorsements have their role. So I'm not dismissing them altogether. But what I really pride myself on is that I want to speak directly to the people. A lot of times, it's like, okay, you have an endorsement. And so just because somebody's name is listed, then that automatically gives the right for large segments to be like, well, I don't even have to look into that person. So-and-so said they're good, so I'm gonna roll with that. And
Yeah.
so I'm big on, being able to stand on my record, being able to have open dialogue and communication. So with all of that, there are a number of community individuals that definitely support and are behind the campaign, but I don't like to really get out and tout endorsements
Yes,
because a
please
lot of it just becomes just political affiliation. Or once again, I'm really want to have conversations, not only in the community, but I'm going to put this plug out right now because I was a little disheartened that, ballots are getting ready to come out in the next couple of weeks. And we haven't had any candidate forums yet. So what a disservice to all the voters that are out there who haven't had an opportunity to see all the candidates come and sit down together, answer questions, and be able to talk through different issues. And so I know that there may be some scheduled in the upcoming weeks, maybe right after the ballots drop. But this is what I'm big on. So when we talk about endorsements and community, it's really getting to the heart. We're doing a lot of door knocking, walking neighborhoods, going out from here out to Rodeo and Hercules, and really trying to get directly to residents when it comes to our vision for the county and letting them see who I am individually without the sign off of somebody that may try to tilt and try to make kingmakers. We have a lot of that in politics where folks will essentially try to decide for voters who should be elected when it really should be based on the merits, the record, the vision, and what that individual will bring to the table in that position.
Yes.
Right.
And so for any of our future electeds or candidates, I don't want to ask who's endorsing. I don't want to know. I want to know about you and your experiences. Still a good question, but not something that I want to know as of yet. Well, I mean, in the future, we can know, but what matters is I want to know you as a person, and the community can hear you and how you see things.
Yes.
Next question. Carlos, you got some?
No. They were just asking one more question. They want to know what youth organization, youth leaders, youth activists that you can relate to.
Trying to understand
what youth organization, youth leaders, youth activists that you can relate to. Yeah.
Relate to anyone trying to make their community better.
Right.
That's the simple answer. Anyone that has a heart for community, anyone that wants to improve in terms of outcomes in whatever space that may be in, I'm supportive of. And so I know they may be asking for maybe specific organizations, or I don't know if they asked for a list of activist names, but it's really about community for me. It's about building. It's about seeing better outcomes. And from an elected position, right, there should be a level of not being partial, right? And so I say that is because objectivity is really something that I hold close, because when you start to tilt towards, specific organizations or specific groups, and once again, we can talk more data or marginalized communities from that perspective, but overall, if government can't be objective and look at really the outcomes for the community as a whole, it gets very difficult in terms of trying to pick and choose winners or who should get certain, attention, for lack of better words. So with that, definitely open in terms of youth, community building all together. So I hope that the person that's asking the question, I think it's the same person that asked the last few.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps in answering that question.
Well, thank you for bringing back like you said, the youth into the city, the voice. You said that after a while it was not there, but you came back and it's back. So that in itself speaks volumes, that you created that space and still make it available. Next question. What does Contra Costa County need right now? Like right now, out of all the different things that are happening, what do we need? I'd say healing. We need to heal.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of tension from a lot of different perspectives. Contra Costa County has depending on what area of the county you're in, there are different needs, right? So the needs here in East County are very different from the needs on the south end when you're looking at, your San Ramon, your Danville areas, or even looking at your larger communities like Concord or Richmond. When you look specifically even in District 5 itself, the difference between what's happening in Pittsburgh and Antioch versus what's happening in Hercules and Martinez is very different. The demographics are different. Everything from socioeconomics, to just the feel of the community. And so in sharing all of that, to get to what Contra Costa needs, it really needs leadership that really will be, and when I say independent, I'm not talking about independent party, but more so just independent thought. And also, once again, in terms of being accountable. So we need good governance from the perspective of we have very limited resources, and I know when you look, you can maybe even ask them the question to those who are viewing. If I ask, what is the county budget? Do you know what the county budget is? We may get a lot of different answers. I get everything from, $10 million to $100 million. But we're looking at a $5.5 billion budget, which can seem like that is, whoa, that's a whole lot of money. But when you're talking about, 1.2 million residents, when you're talking about specific social programs and services, that are some are federally and state mandated, it gets really limited in terms of the general dollars that can be spent on different program areas by the county. And so just going to good governance, one thing that is big for me is that, we can look at the new state budget that just came out, where we're talking about shortfalls and deficits, right? And so why does that matter is because if state revenues decline, then the money that they then forward to counties for specific services that we provide will also decline. And then we'll have to look at different ways of shuffling the deck. So good governance is really big to me. And I'll share and I'll preface with this is that there are a lot of meaningful ideas, projects, programs, services that local governments, regional governments can provide. And government is very good at coming up with the new idea and putting money towards getting it going, but less great at sustaining it, right? So I build it or it gets created, but what happens 5-10 years down the line? Will you sustain it? And do you have the revenues to keep it going? And so that's really the lens that I look through, and there are specific things that I can look at with that. But good governance is really the key for me. The second, and I really want to focus more on District 5. I know we're talking about the county at large, but District 5 and where I'm looking to run, which is everything from the Antioch Bridge all the way to the city of Hercules. I mean, that is the most expansive. When you talk about a district in Contra Costa County, we touch East County, Central County, and West County, which brings its own challenges in itself. But a lot of District 5 is your old industrial sites, right? So everything in Hercules, from the old powder company, so you're thinking about, Martinez, you think about the refineries that are in District 5, and then you look at Pittsburgh, Antioch, a lot of the old steel industries that are here, right? A lot of that has gone away. And so we're now left with a lot of blighted areas that need some revitalization, that need a lot of cleanup. So there's environmental impacts that are there as well. And so with all of that, that's a big focus for me as far as how do we create not only the new job centers that are desperately needed, not only in East County, but Contra Costa County as a whole, but how do we bring revitalization to these communities? And there are specific ways that I can get into as far as focus for that. But that is a big thing for me. East Contra Costa County, we got to reverse this commute. Obviously, traffic congestion becomes a big issue. And public safety is a larger issue. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about that even a little bit later. But as far as the need for Contra Costa County, it starts with good governance. And for District 5, we need revitalization for a lot of our old industrial sites to be able to create economic development and really job opportunities for the region.
Yes, because there's definitely a lot of those. And I'm glad that you have eyes on that, because we could put it to work and make something productive out of it for the community. So
That's right.
okay, we mentioned infrastructure, transportation. So did you know that the Antioch Railroad is closing? That station.
Yeah. So you're talking about the Amtrak?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I did hear about the Amtrak station closing.
And so with that closing, it's going to prevent families, commuters, folks that go to their doctor's appointments, folks that go to worship services, folks that travel for work. They're going to have to commute to Oakley and jump over instead of having that. Like, is that something? Is that how do you view that from a leadership perspective? Do you think that that's beneficial to the area? I think it had to do with houseless and it being a dangerous station. But how can we how what do you think about shutting it off completely? It's like cutting off a source. Like, how could we fix that? Like, is that a possibility? What would you
Yeah,
envision?
and definitely I do have limited information in terms of all the makings of how it got shut down or how it got to be. I don't know if the city was involved in any of those conversations or not, but definitely it makes it harder in terms of when you're talking about transportation, you're talking about circulation overall, right? In Contra Costa County and specifically in East County, where we know a majority of our workforce is commuting out of the area, an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to work. And so I think overall transportation is a larger, definitely issue that we have to work on resolving regionally. And so we're looking at all the different modes of transportation. I think as you look at that, I don't know if it was Amtrak's decision ultimately with, if they were building a new one in Oakley, I don't know, the closeness to the Antioch location, they were looking at those type of things. But overall, to your point, Antioch being, the second largest city in Contra Costa County, obviously has a large population that depends on transportation, public transportation specifically as well, or different type of avenues. So with that, we're looking at a lot of different transportation measures. So one of them I know has been an ongoing conversation. The county is doing a feasibility study right now about ferry service. This has been a long conversation in terms of a potential new spot. I think they're looking at potentially one or two new locations and looking at feasibility between Hercules, Martinez, Pittsburgh, and Antioch. So I think it'll be exciting to see what comes back with that feasibility study in terms of what the projections are for ridership, what infrastructure will be needed, how it will be sustained, will be key conversations for that. We look at transportation, obviously we need improvements with BART. It's good that we have, the BART stations or the e-BART that came to Pittsburgh Center and also to Antioch and seeing that future development. And then also I know there's a pilot project with Glide that is looking at some small autonomous type vehicles that will be able to create a trackway between East County. So I think we have to look at it all. I think transportation is shifting. I know Tri-Delta Transit is also looking at new options. They really had some success with the Try My Ride pilot as well, which is the smaller buses that are more on demand, that are going to specific areas. And I think we're going to see more of that. I think Uber and Lyft really disrupted transportation, and public transportation is now trying to figure out how they can include some of those models that are more on demand, more nimble, to be able to increase ridership for public transportation. But a big thing for me, I know that there's also another advocate on the board of supervisors, being Supervisor Burgess, for this, is that we have to bring more jobs to East Contra Costa County. That is one of the biggest ways to address transportation issues, is that trying to reduce the number of folks that have to commute out by having more job opportunities locally. But you're absolutely right. What folks that depend on some of these transportation means, we want to make sure that we're increasing opportunity and not taking away.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have a whole delta. We have a whole delta on our riverfront, and Amazon was smart. They invested to be right on the water. I envision ferries and little mini cruises, and we could be popping here in Rivertown in our area. Okay, next question. I'll combine the two because there are housing insecurities. Housing insecurities then leads to houselessness. This is really broad. I know it's not a one stop. Oh, let's do this and we can do that, because some folks want to live like that. But how do I guess, how do you think we got here? What would you do to help those in need? Would you, yeah.
Yeah, this is as you shared out. There's definitely multifaceted, and this is really decades in the making.
Mm,
This isn't something that just happened overnight,
right.
but it's decades in the making.
Right, right.
We can talk from a housing issue in terms of not only affordability but just accessibility of housing.
Mhm.
That can come from everything from how zoning laws are in the state of California. I know there's a lot in terms of what it takes to get housing built. Since 2019, state of California has really tried to lax those policies to try to speed up housing production. But nevertheless, decades of kind of not having enough housing built kind of created the scarcity that we have. So that's one area, because that not only, in terms of less housing, but it drives up the cost of housing, which is also the component of that with affordability. The other area really deals in terms of just wages, right? And so if folks aren't able to afford to stay in terms of the cost of living increases that we're seeing, then we're seeing more and more folks who are dipping into homelessness. I believe one of the department heads for the county had shared that for every one individual that they're providing services to get out of homelessness, they're having two slip into it, right? So it's like we have to find a way to stop folks slipping into homelessness while we're trying to address the reality of what we're seeing on the streets. I think another area that you see in California over the past decades is the reduction of mental health and substance use services. And so we're seeing that in a large scale. I know that it was a little bit taboo in past years to say, it's not just folks who are dealing with substance and mental health, which is true, right? Everybody out on the streets is not necessarily dealing with substance use and mental health. But the data that's coming in now, and specifically from the county with their homeless services, is sharing that a large percentage are, and especially the longer that they're out there, you're talking about folks who are trying to now survive and dealing with elements that, folks normally would not be dealing with, right? And so how they're trying to cope with that could lead to more issues when you're talking about that type of length of time dealing with homelessness. And so that's something that we need to ramp up. We know the state is bringing in and trying to try out care courts, but we're also seeing that they're trying to put a new ballot measure, I believe, at the end of the year to try to revamp our mental health services as well. And so I think it's just a shift in understanding that there is a housing component, but there also is a level of we need services to deal with substance use and mental health. And I think the county is really uniquely situated in terms of dealing with homelessness, right? Not only because it's in our wheelhouse to deal with health and human services, but also when you talk about just the core functions of the county, it really has a role to play. And I think this is something that we're going to see more coordination, which is another key issue of why we haven't been seeing the success when it comes to dealing with homelessness, is that there's a lack of coordination. We're talking tens of billions of dollars that have been spent, over the past 5 years or so. If you think just in the county, if I just ask a quick question, how much money do you think has been spent by the county just from 2019 to 2022? How much money do you think the county spent on homeless services?
I'm going to say 1 million.
No, you're not going to say 1 million.
More or
Yeah,
less?
yeah, more.
3 million?
172 million.
Wow.
Shit.
Right. That's a lot. Right. So it's not something that is light, right? But then we look up, right, and in that same time frame, we've seen homelessness increase by 4%.
Right. So, was it effective?
Right. So that is the point, right? And for me, it goes back to good governance, right? Dollars are very scarce. They are limited. So if we spend 172 million, what should we be expecting as a community in terms of, is it effective? Is it working? Is the focus in the right area? So I'll just use this quick test case before we move on to the next. So in the city of Reno, there was a news segment that came out, and then they, of course, harped on San Francisco, saying, hey, is this a model San Francisco can learn from? But essentially, they reduced their homelessness in half. And essentially what happened, and they spent, I believe it was about $30 million. And so what they did is they created a basically center with about 600 beds, right? So they're homeless population was probably about 1,200 or so, right? So they literally, by creating this space with 600 beds, took literally half of their homeless and gave them a place in order to go to. And so with that, it also provided the services. And so they're building out essentially this area to where they can provide these homeless services, and then also try to provide a level of accountability with the folks that are utilizing the services. Easier said than done. I understand. But this is something that the county has also shared when they're doing homeless outreach, is that literally 50% of the folks that they're finding out there that are unsheltered are refusing the service, right? So we're trying to find the model that works in terms of things that people can buy into, whether they don't want to go into some of the centers because they don't want some of the rules or some of the restrictions, or maybe it's just, once again, going back to the substance use and mental health services that may need to be provided to the individual. But with all of that, yes, we have to continue to work towards addressing homelessness. And it's really more so just getting smarter about our investments and really getting to the root and being able to be accountable for the dollars that we're spending.
All right. All right. I wish our cities would invest in well, we have organizations that do provide showers, and but if the city was to fund it and really just give folks dignity in that small sense in different cities. But I like that you have a vision, and there's obviously a model that exists. So thank you for bringing that forward. I love Reno. But the fact that they made that happen is that it's possible. So thank you. Next question. What does guaranteed income mean to you with your experiences in city council and governance? And what would you, I guess, what's your outlook on it?
Yeah, and well, I know there's a lot definitely of conversation, whether it's guaranteed income, universal basic income. It's a large conversation. Definitely have a lot more thought in terms. Once again, I talk about sustainability, right? So where the dollars come to sustain an effort. I know that's not only a local conversation. You've seen pilots out in Stockton, and I know former Mayor Tubbs now kind of goes around nationally and trying to get mayors to commit to that pledge towards moving towards universal basic income or guaranteed income. Once again, for me, the conversation is, where is the source of funding? A lot of the pilot programs that we've seen were done by like philanthropic dollars, private dollars, foundations, or someone to start the pilot. And then it comes to, okay, who sustains it after that? So I think that's a large conversation. For me, I think the larger issue we're trying to deal here is dealing with poverty. I think that's the larger conversation, and that this may be a vehicle or an approach that folks are looking at to try. So for me, poverty, fighting poverty, breaking the back of poverty that we see definitely in our community, specifically like Pittsburgh, looking at Antioch, looking at Bay Point. I'm specifically talking about District 5 and other areas as well throughout the region. We know that there are definitely, poverty fighters. I think looking at education, looking at employment have been key factors in terms of building folks up. When you look at a lot of the data, if you look at, some of the last census data that comes out, typically when you find communities that have lower educational attainment, you start to see more of the poverty that also even deals with, the income levels within the community. So I think there are definitely pathways when we talk about education, we talk about employment, and the lack of those opportunities that we have here locally. So that's really a big focus for me. But going back specifically to your question in regarding to guaranteed income, for me, I'm looking for models. I always look at in terms of, for the pilot programs that have been tried, what were the outcomes? I know we can look at it and say, hey, well, individuals may have had, a little bit extra money to buy groceries, or maybe an extra, money to get that car fixed, which I think are helpful. But as we're trying to address the root cause, I'm a big proponent of this. This is kind of one of those old kind of idioms, is that you teach a man to fish. You give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day, but teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. And so that's really where I'm at, is the teaching about how can we get people to that place of self-sufficiency. And there are definitely programs out there that are providing viable models, and being able to, get people to that place where they're being able to have a living wage, getting to that place where they're able to sustain their families. And I know a lot of the programs are trying to supplement that. And once again, it just comes back to, can it be sustained? And that's really where my focus comes when it comes to guaranteed income.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Next question. Why are you the right candidate for District 5?
Yeah, I think from experience,
Mm.
I think in talking specifically to the issues, I pride myself in there, and I'll share this, is because I know that we're living in a very polarized time, to where it can be easily folks shouting at each other, not hearing each other. You're here on that side, I'm here on that side. I personally call it political gangbanging. It's just like, okay, we see what the effects of gangs have done to communities historically. We're now letting it play out on a political level. And so this isn't to undermine what any party would stand for, but I've never been registered to any political party. And I say that is because there's a level of independence that we need from our elected officials. And I'm not saying that you can't be effective if you're a part of a party, but I am saying that if you commit to things before you get all the facts, then that's a disservice to the public. Or if you can't hear somebody with an opposing view because you live life, whether it's in a vacuum or you're only hearing certain viewpoints, it becomes difficult to make public policy decisions. So from that standpoint, independent thinker in terms of being able to work on behalf of the people and not a special interest or a political platform, I believe I'm going to be the only candidate to be able to really say that and speak to it. And I'll just highlight that with this. So we have a senator who's retiring from the state Senate, Steve Glazer. And so he did an interview maybe a few months back, and he wrote also an op-ed piece just talking about the state and the condition of California. And so in it, he shared that, we've spent a lot of money to address a lot of issues in California, but we have not gotten the results. Oh. And so the news anchor asked him, well, why? And he said, well, the issue is that we have friends in labor, we have friends in the environmental community, we have friends who are advocates, and they all have good causes, but we can't tell any of them no. And so because of that, just let's take this from a housing perspective, right? So we want to build housing, but the labor community wants a certain piece because maybe they want a PLA involved in it. The environmental piece says, hey, but we don't want it built in this area. And then the advocacy groups may come out and say, hey, we need this specific price point, or we need this amount of affordable housing. Well, all of those create certain constraints, right? So if the labor piece may make it more costly in terms of the building, where it can be built may decrease the imprint of the actual development, which means that it reduces the number of units that could be built, and also which drives up the cost of the housing being built, and all these other factors. So once again, I bring it up not to say that any of these are inherently bad, but if you have decision makers who are making concessions to every group, by the time the policy is adopted, it's not effective. And so that's essentially what we've seen happen in a lot of these spaces in California, is that we want one thing, but then we create policies that either drive up the cost or make it more difficult to accomplish the goal. And so I say all of that is to say that being an independent voice that can engage with the various groups, but not be at a place where you're beholden or you've already made concessions or promises to certain groups for certain outcomes. When you make a decision on the dais, and you guys being, residents in the county, in your city, if you go to a public meeting and that decision maker has already basically told a group, yes, I'm going to go this direction, what's the point of me showing up as a resident if you've already told somebody yes before you heard all of the facts, or you had all of the data, you had all the information, or you heard everyone in the community on that matter? So for me, I'm getting really passionate about it because it comes back to good governance. And so when you say, why are you the candidate for District 5? I truly believe I'm the one that's free from most of those type of ties. And then also, once again, the lens that I'm looking through, and also speaking specifically to the issues and what's going on, being on the ground and being impacted by so many of the things that we talk about. And really, I think just the passion to do this work, I think will come through and make me the right candidate for the Board of Supervisors.
Okay. Okay. Okay, next question. Being Black or brown or from a different ethnicity other than Caucasian, I think it's safe to say that we've all experienced a little bit of racism. But I would like to hear if you have experienced any racism, and if so, how did you handle it?
Yeah, and definitely reflecting on that. I can't recall a specific situation. While I'm sure there's been a time where there may have been discrimination or bias involved. My mom always reminds me of a time being in elementary school where a little girl had said some things to me about being Black, and just how that conversation went at that time, and just kind of looking at that lens. And I think it's always been, never allowing others to give them that power over you. That's always been something for me personally, is that, whether you think a certain way or certain actions that you take, not allowing that to either define me or discourage me or keep me from moving forward. But even in thinking about that question, I can't recall specific in terms of dealing with, blatant racism. I know there are a lot of different things that we can look at historically in terms of just what has caused certain conditions that we find ourselves in. And so I can look through that lens, but personally, I haven't found something specifically that I can point to. But even in that, just not being discouraged, moving forward, and working to prove folks wrong. If folks have that type of lens or looking through that type of, once again, kind of mind frame, then we know the issue is there, and we continue to push forward. So definitely, that's my thought, and looking forward to standing up and just continuing to show the great diversity that we have in our community. I think for me, it's hard and difficult growing up in Pittsburgh, where, obviously California is a melting pot, but Pittsburgh has always been a melting pot. So it's like, from your AAPI community to, your African-American community, Italian community, Hispanic community, we're all always been together. And so never really had those direct experiences that I could really point to.
Okay. Well, I think your mother, she did an amazing job at solidifying you as a human being at such a young age and just setting your standards high. And I think that's beautiful. And that's great that you didn't experience or that you could recall, but it probably has to do with that initial empowerment that your mom gave you. That's
absolutely
right.
Okay, next question. Do you think that the Antioch police scandal is an isolated incident? I got into an argument with somebody yesterday online. He's like, "Oh, that's just Antioch, and it's just." What's your outlook on that?
Yeah, and I guess if the question is more, do I think that it's possible that type of thinking or actions are taking place or could take place in other police departments, or is that more of it like it's not just happened in the Antioch Police Department, but potentially can be happening in other jurisdictions as well? And I think that is possible, right? I definitely think it's possible that, there could be others in the profession with that type of view or having that type of mind frame. And for me, it's definitely, this is a larger conversation that we're having just about accountability overall, is that, man, we're looking at this. The first line of defense is that, the good men and women that are in that profession, if you're seeing that happen, it's time to stand up, right? Like that's the first area. It's time to stand up, because that type of thinking, those type of actions will only demean the profession and make it harder for the public to trust folks who are very valuable in terms of folks that are working in law enforcement. The second is that, we're seeing a lot in terms of just community oversight, community accountability, right? And so for a large part, it was like kind of out of sight, out of mind. We don't see what happens with the inner workings, but now there's more of I don't want to say just scrutiny, but it's more of an accountability factor to say, hey, we want to understand how the operations work. We want to understand in terms of what's happening, in terms of the strategies used to keep our communities safe. And so I bring that up is that, when you elect officials, you expect them, or you should expect them, to have an understanding of what's happening in the organization. And so are there things that may be happening with an undercurrent or underlining? Yes. But if you have good accountability measures in place, if there's good relationships when it comes to hiring practices, good relationships when it comes to oversight. One thing that we've been doing in the city of Pittsburgh for the past several years is that we get quarterly reports from our chief of police, one for use of force incidents, and then also for any internal investigations that are happening. And so one is that we outsource. So our police department doesn't do any of its internal affairs investigations. They outsource that. But we get that report directly, not only from the chief in some isolated chamber. This is publicly at a meeting, right? So quarterly, we're talking about how many times was force used and in what incidents was it used, if folks were injured, all of that type of information. And then, what's the number of citizen complaints that we've received, the number of internal complaints that were generated, because it's that type of leadership that keeps the conversation open, but also keeps accountability in-house. And so I know that there are things, and we can talk about other aspects of public safety and also just policing that we're seeing happening right now. But back to your point, yes, it's possible that there are definitely others in other police departments who have that same mind frame or maybe carrying out some of those same tactics. And we would hope that what has happened and transpired in Antioch puts those type of folks on notice. But at the same time, we have to do our due diligence with accountability, even as we're looking at supporting, obviously law enforcement and public safety. But community policing is definitely advancing. I definitely want to shout out. I know there's a lot of work that's been done in Pittsburgh over the past, probably, I would say 20 years that has really helped us turn the corner. But it's all in partnership. And I think that that's what we're seeing more and more is the need for partnership when it comes to how we're addressing issues that are going on in our community. So appreciate that question. And I know there's a lot more work to do.
Yeah, thank you. That was solid. Okay, next question. What does public safety mean to you?
Yeah, another good question. So yeah, public safety, I guess in a general sense, you want to protect folks from any type of harm, or any danger for that perspective. And I think of public safety at a county level, I'm thinking of fire, as well. I'm thinking, obviously, they have the sheriff's department, but also when you think about violence prevention, I know this is something being in the Bay Area in terms of what's going on locally, and then also even with some local initiatives that are happening, looking at, okay, we see in terms of response to things when they happen, right? So if there's imminent danger, something is happening, then you have a response. If somebody's in danger, they're able to call and someone responds. I think a lot what we're seeing now with public safety, because even in Pittsburgh, we've looked at it through the lens of, street safety and improvements as a part of public safety as well. Seeing, a lot of, the pedestrian fatalities that we've had here locally. So we add that to the public safety conversation as well. But I think when we're getting to the crux of it, we want to make sure that folks are not being harmed, they're not being injured, whether we're talking about life or property, keeping that from damage. And so there are a number of ways, and I should say more strategies that are starting to be implemented to look at public safety measures. And so we know we depend heavily in terms of law enforcement to be those first responders. Even when you think of first responders, you're talking about fire department, you're talking about EMS as well. So there's a lot in that public safety realm, which we traditionally had. And also we're seeing new components that are trying to be more proactive and more community-based, that are saying, hey, how do we get to the root in terms of violence? I know there's a lot of efforts. One thing that we had that went away was the ceasefire program that was being led by the county. They also had paid for a position for one of our officers in the city of Pittsburgh to lead the East County effort. But it really takes a real, rallying of community folks to stay engaged, and then also to have the direct services and the funding and resources available. I want to just highlight this real quick because it dives into public safety, but more of kind of the inequities that we're seeing in the county. Is that there was a report that came out maybe about a decade ago that said for every $8 of nonprofit or private funding that went to West County, there was only $1 being spent in East County. Meaning a lot of the nonprofits, when you think of nonprofits, right, that are in the Greater Bay Area, foundations that provide, grants or, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars to local communities, local organizations to do very important work. right? Even as we're talking about this space of public safety, right? That goes a long way versus areas like East County where we have a lack of really any prominent nonprofit organizations, foundations that can really help and support that the work that we're trying to do that we know will impact community. And so we're doing work. I know the Board of Supervisors has looked at this with trying to increase capacity of local nonprofits here in the area, but that's also a big component when we're talking about some of the services that we need in our community. We need nonprofit partners. We need those who are in the private industry, in the private sector, to come alongside the limited resources we have to be able to invest in whether it's programs, services, and offer things to the community that we may be falling short in. So all of that, as we're talking about the realm of public safety, there are a lot of things that we need to bring in, a lot of partnerships that need to be solidified so that we can really start making some real change and impact.
Hey, community, this is why we need to know what's going on in the county, because that funding goes to the cities. And at some point, Antioch, straight up, we weren't getting a lot of resources. And I say that because like my son needed like after school program care. They had never had one before. Now we do. And I just think about how many families that really needed that help that didn't get it. And so it's really important, y'all, that that we have people in these positions that are aware of those where it needs to go and how to make sure it's used. Because West County, is that San Ramon?
So West County is your Richmond, your San Pablo, El Cerrito,
Okay.
out there on that end of the county.
Right on. Okay, well, thank you for that. Next question. What would an African American holistic center look like to you?
Yes, so I know that there's definitely some buzz and some headway that's been made, even with some recent decisions by the County Board of Supervisors. So I think it'll go back definitely in terms of a big issue that we've found, not only within the community, but addressing in terms of services that are needed. We need mentorship. We need mentorship for our young folks. We need mentorship even from a level of folks that may be trying to get into certain careers or taking certain pathways, or just having folks that are there, right? So when you think of even folks that have gone through, foster care, or you think of folks that may not have certain influences in their life, being able to have elders and mentors in the community or in a space that can help guide, that can help teach, that can help keep them on track is a big piece that I think would be needed in a center here in East County. Also, when we talk about financial literacy, it is so imperative in the time that we're in to provide services that are specifically around financial literacy. So, when we were in school, we didn't learn much about credit, didn't learn much about balancing the checkbook, doing your taxes, what it would take to buy a home, right? We're talking about building generational wealth and trying to break poverty. And, we can talk about cycles and going back towards redlining and why generations weren't able to purchase homes for that while, right? But in terms of moving forward, that generational wealth of being able to own a home, having that equity, being able to, provide for the family and have that sustainable type of footprint in the community is very important. So financial literacy opportunities, programs would definitely be good, as I talked about also with the mentorship. And then even, how we can supplement a big issue that we're finding right now, if you want to say African-American community or just look at our demographic in terms of East Contra, Costa County as well, is we have very poor literacy rates. So we're having, our young kids, by the time they get to kindergarten, really by the time they get to third grade, if they're not at level, the trajectory of what that leads to and some of the issues that causes, when you look at communities like ours versus one maybe like San Ramon and others, it's like an exact opposite in terms of the trajectory. So being able to support early literacy is going to be a big point as well. Also, in just support academic support. And there's a number of other things. Probably the list can go on and on.
Yeah.
I think definitely when I just look at a space for mentorship opportunities, a space in terms of financial literacy and community building, I think is a big point. We have a lot of entrepreneurs in the community, a lot of entrepreneurs, folks that are trying to start their own restaurant or catering business. Folks that are starting their own clothing lines, folks that have engineering and coding minds that want to. And there's a lot. How do we bring that together? How do we foster and invest in that type of creativity, that type of entrepreneurship within our community is also something that I believe would be a great benefit of having like an entrepreneurship hub where folks that have these ideas can get the support they need, find out how to access capital, and be able to go out there and build something for themselves, for their community, and be able to support their family as well. So those are just a few things that would be great.
Ideas are great, and the more services and resources, the better. Okay, and then what would you say to people who think that their votes don't matter? Like if they're like, oh, I'm not going to register, or how would you empower those folks and let them know that they do matter?
Yeah, your vote absolutely matter, and I'll go back to what I shared before. You know, all politics are local. You know, you can see your local officials. You should at least in the community, right? You can go to City Hall and look that official in the face. There's a level of accountability that you can get at the local level. You may not ever see the president of the United States or a Congress member who is in DC. Maybe you might not even see a state legislator who was in Sacramento. But the fact that you can walk down to your city hall, you know, get down there, look officials in the face, hold them accountable, voice your concerns and be heard is very important. And you can even look at the last election of why every vote matters. I know you asked that specifically. So from an accountability standpoint, definitely stay engaged. But from a voting standpoint, right, we've seen elections that were narrowly decided literally by one vote in the last election, where they had to go in and recount the votes over, right? So it's like to say that, you know, your vote doesn't matter. Just look at what's happening here locally, where who is in that decision-making of power could literally be decided by one vote. I think it was both in Antioch and in Richmond where they had to go in and recount because of how close the race was. So I say that is that, you know, that lets us know that every vote does count. You know, when we're here at the local level, we're not dealing with the electoral college at the local level. We're dealing with straight votes that are going towards who you're electing to vote for the seat put in office. And then once again, you can see these officials, you can touch them, you can go to meetings. So I would let everybody know, you know, even if you felt that none of the ideas that you want to see come forward have ever happened, or you voted in times past and you were let down or disappointed, I would say stay engaged, right? Keep on. The fight continues, right? Anything that is worth having is worth fighting for.
That's
so
right.
the community that we live in, that we call home, we want to see things change. We want to see them get better. And if there are folks who are making decisions to do that, and I have a voice to be able to impact it, I have to use it. It's my duty. I know we just came off of MLK weekend, right? And so we were talking about, you know, Dr. King and his role, not only in the freedom fight and civil rights era, but just the fight for the Voting Rights Act, the fight to be able to go to the booth and to be able to cast your vote, right? And what it took, they literally shed blood for that opportunity, right? And so what a disservice for us who are still continuing in this day to have low voter turnout when we have literally those that have blazed the trail before us that literally put their lives on the line for us to be able to do it, right? So that should be incentive enough to want to get out. But once again, your vote matters, especially here locally, because this is how the balance of power continues to shift, and it's how we keep people accountable. This is how we keep folks accountable, is by staying engaged, not only exercising your right to vote, but once they're in office, show up to the meeting, give them an email, call them and let them know. You know, grab a couple of your neighbors and come to the meeting too and say, hey, this is what's going on in our neighborhood. Because although a decision may not be made that very night, your voice is being heard is something that we ultimately will be thinking about, because we heard it. We heard community members express it. And then as officials and then working with staff, it becomes our obligation to address community needs, and especially areas that are becoming problematic. So absolutely, your vote matters, your voice matters. Stay engaged and utilize that right.
Thank you.
Right.
Yes. And people need to be reminded, because I mean, folks, maybe kids, young lives, maybe they really don't realize that really happened. People really died People marched. People were brutalized. To this day, there's other states and places that folks are strategizing to make it difficult. But no, yes, thank you very much for that. Switching it up,
Yes.
what do you do for fun?
So yeah, man, fun. What is that? This is fun for me, and I know sometimes it seems like what, like no. I love talking about policy. I really do. I love, once again, talking about community building. It's a passion. So for me, it can be looked at as work, but it's passion. It's fun. I love interacting with people. This is building community right now and relationships, and I know Carlos, but getting to meet you now as well, right? It's building to where you get to know somebody, you talk through differences, talk through issues, things that are happening. But getting back to more of the crux in terms of fun, I've done music my whole life, right? So I'm a creative. So I rap. I still use it in terms of being able to relate to our youth and in our local church, ministering to youth and doing ministry. Not trying to be a rapper or get a career out of it, but just something that's still a hobby and something to still do. It also serves as a release as well, just to be able to, get your thoughts and write them down, turn on an instrumental, turn on a beat and just kind of let it go. It's something that I love to do. Obviously spending time with my kids, so, my daughter, she is now learning piano. She takes karate. So just practicing with her. My son just started playing baseball. So getting out there, I played baseball growing up. So being able to get out there, play catch with him, spend time with the kids is always fun as well. I love to eat, so if folks want to go out and, break bread and have a conversation and laugh. We're not getting enough laughter these days. Everything is so tense. Everybody is just so mad all the time. It's just like, just laugh. Let's just be in community. We'll see that we have more in common than we have differences. And yes, there are things that we can work through and have conversations and disagree and still be friends after. But with all of that, like I said, there's a lot of things I enjoy, whether it's playing sports, creative, doing music, and really for me, just family, being with my friends, my church family. It's all love, it's all joy, and so it just keeps me going.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Right.
And that's cool. Go ahead, Carlos.
No. Oh, go ahead and finish, and then I just AA Nation. I'm gonna just pick one of your questions, but I'm gonna let Mary finish or Miss Patty finish what she was saying, and then I'll ask one of the questions because we're in overtime already. But yeah, I don't want AA Nation to think that we're ignoring them. So, what were you gonna say now, Miss Patty?
Oh yeah, that I guess spoken word music is a form of healing, and so that's nice that you're sharing that with your community, and it's poetic, and so that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Last question: who do you look up to? Are there any role models you have growing up? Any artists, speakers, electeds? Who are your role models?
Man, that's a good.
Okay, let's do.
That's a good. Yeah, man. That's a good question. In terms of role models, as I shared before, I think a lot of my role models that I didn't realize at the time were my coaches growing up. Spent a lot of time obviously playing sports and coaches and the time that they spent giving rides home, making sure that we were good, just positive male role models. And also even the women that helped out in terms of, we had team moms or even assistant coaches that just helped out. And you realize, after you grow up, like, man, how impactful that was to have them taking care of me, giving me rides, things like that. So definitely from that perspective on a local level, always looked up, you can look at historical figures as well. I look at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So obviously that's big for me in terms of not only in faith, but just what he was able to accomplish for, the selflessness, the sacrifice that he made for himself, for his family, but ultimately for the greater cause, but also just the effectiveness and understanding that, even the time that he was alive, he wasn't as well received as, we love him now and celebrate that national holiday. but just understand that it was okay to be uncomfortable and standing for what was right. Personally, also my pastor, as I shared, my uncle, who was really a father figure to me. I shared about, in terms of the tragic loss of my father, and so my uncle really came in, and he was a father figure, but also a father even in the faith, and instilling in me godly principles, instilling in me to love God, to love people. And that's been a big imprint on my life, and how I go about, and just my state of mind as well. And then even just looking now, as I shared before, I was into music growing up, so I had a lot of influences when it come to music, local Bay Area.
Okay, who's local Bay Area?
Yeah, local Bay Area. So I grew up under the era where you had the Jacka, you had you had Mac Dre, and you had others who really had an influence. And if we were, whether we were supposed to be listening to it or doing the things that we were doing or not, is another conversation for another day.
It was an era. It was an era.
It was an era, absolutely,
Sure
with large influence. And when I think of music as well during that time, I was really drawn towards the business acumen of someone like, say, Jay-Z and others who were really utilizing the music, but then also, showing kind of this business acumen that I thought was very necessary and vital, especially where you see things are going today, just with entrepreneurship and that opportunity to not pigeonhole yourself into this one area, but utilizing your gifts and being able to leverage them in order for greater uses was something that I was drawn to. So kind of from that creative space, also business, entrepreneurship, acumen, and then once again from the community building, there's a lot that I draw from. So I can't say one person specifically, but just kind of sharing just some qualities and the folks that I just shared about was definitely inspirational growing up. And then as I'm looking now, this is an awesome time with so much that's happening. Just want to be able to make an imprint as well and do something positive and leave a legacy for my children after me.
100%. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Jelani. I know that was a lot of questions and we went a little over time.
I know we did just one last question. I know I had to pick all these questions. I know Mary asked some. I guess AA Nation just wants to know, what party are you running in?
I share it before, but definitely share it again. No political. I'm not registered to any political party, and I really want to express it once again. Your local races, your school board, your city council, your county board of supervisor, these are considered nonpartisan races. And so when I say that, is that there's a reason, right? You're not required, or you shouldn't need party backing when it comes to the local level, because local level is about dealing with really community level issues. And so with that, I know I kind of shared already at length before about some of the other things I brought up, but not running under any party, running just as myself and as somebody that wants to improve our community and believe I have a lot to offer in the seat of county supervisor for District 5.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well said.
All right. Thank you.
I learned a lot today. I'm so excited. We have leaders going into spaces that we need. So I know you're up against the other folks, but I'm really, I have hope. So
thank you so much, and thank you for the invite, Carlos. Always appreciate it. And
thank you, man. I really do appreciate this. I appreciate your time, Miss Patty's time, your time. Just one quick announcement, everybody. I wanted to say, so we got a website now, and it's called thecarlostacoshow.com. And what we're doing is, you got a brief bio of us, the hosts and all that, but the main thing is I'm focusing on the resource page. And this is where I need you as a community to help me. If you guys check out the resource page, there's nonprofit organizations on there that help specific needs that the community requires or needs. So if there's anything, there's a bunch missing. So I just put a bunch on there real quick, and with the information for food, clothing, immigration status, they're all on there. So if you see something, if you go to the front link, it has or the front page has links at the bottom, which is the YouTube channel and the Instagram. If you just click the Instagram and leave me a message with the information and the website, that would be great. And
yes, knowledge is
again,
power. We want
yeah,
everybody to know what is out there, where to get it, because there's resources out there, and knowledge is power. Oh, and register to vote too, y'all. If you're not
register to vote.
Yes.
go register.
Mhm.
You do it online.
Yeah, and definitely share. If I could just put a plug in, this primary election is March 5th, right? Most people aren't thinking about elections in March. Typically, there's lower voter turnout in primary elections. California shifted away. Our primaries used to be in June, but I think maybe an election ago was the first time that they had it in March. So just putting it out there, we have an election coming up March 5th. Ballots will be going out February 5th. So literally in the next couple of weeks, you'll start receiving ballots at home. And you can fill it out, take it to one of the drop boxes, mail it back into the election division, or turn it into a poll on election day. Just exercise that right, vote, and hopefully that you'll consider and vote Jelani Killings for County Supervisor, District 5.
Right. And with that, we're out. And I'm gonna leave everybody. Oh, thank you all. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, go ahead, subscribe, like. We need you guys' support. Share the show. We're every Thursday, 8:00 Pacific Standard Time. And thank you, Jelani, Miss Patty, for you guys' time. I appreciate you guys so much.
Thank you for hosting, as always. We need these spaces.
Right, we sure do. And with that, I'm gonna end with this.
Okay.
Hey.
Peace out, everybody, and God bless.
Bye.